All right. I see that some of you have gotten in here early. Welcome. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I'll have to talk to the tech team, but as you noted, nobody said anything incriminating. So thank you so much for joining us. You probably heard me thanking our wonderful panelists for their time, and we are very appreciative of that. So we're gonna get started here in just a moment. We're letting all of you all in, or you're all wandering in on your own, and we will start here in just a moment. So thank you so much for joining us. All right, so we're getting more folks coming on in. So as you join, if you want to go ahead and add where you're calling in from or dialing in from into the chat, if you would like to engage in networking and all that good stuff, go ahead and put your LinkedIn in there. And if there's anything in particular that you want to talk about or hear about today, go ahead and put that in. We've got a wonderful group here, and they will be answering certainly my questions that we've gathered from the Red Thread platform, but they are also open to yours. And we've got enough folks that I think we can manage chat as well as the live conversation at the same time. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. Okay, we're going to get started properly. So welcome to today's webinar, which is on AI and HR. Something new and different none of you have been focused on at all, I know. But what we are trying to do with today's webinar is really to bring on some exceptional product leaders who are part of our Red Thread Tech Consortium to ask them questions, the questions that we're hearing from you all, the questions that we have been seeing in other places as well, to get their perspective on where this is all going. And particularly, as you'll hear in just a minute, what it is that AI is going to do for the HR function, how HR should be helping with the organization, what we should be thinking about analytics, about ethics and responsible AI, and then the types of questions that you all are going to be doing or should be asking the vendors in your space. So for those of you who I haven't met, I am Stacia Garr. I'm co-founder of Red Thread Research. And if you don't know who Red Thread Research is, this is our opportunity to meet you. Hi, welcome. We're glad to have met. We are a research advisory and community platform where we are really focused on helping folks cut through the noise. There's a lot of noise, particularly here with AI. And our focus is helping you all understand what is it that you should be paying attention? How should you be thinking about difficult challenges? And in this case today, with AI. I want to mention a big thank you to our Red Thread Tech Consortium. Our Red Thread Tech Consortium is comprised of roughly 30 vendors who are dedicated to supporting high quality, unbiased research. And they are how we're able to put on these webinars or how we're able to do our tech research. So we are extraordinarily grateful to our Tech Consortium members, and in particular, grateful to our Tech Consortium members who are here today. So with that, I want to go ahead and begin with a few introductions of who I am joined by on our panel. So we have first and foremost here, Adam Binney. Adam, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, Stacia. I'm Adam Binney. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Visier. I am responsible for our innovation and how we are transforming ourselves to be ready in this AI revolution and to bring that technology to bear. Very nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Adam. Josh, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Kamrath. I'm the CEO of Bongo, and we are transforming the way skills get verified and facilitating credentialing. And also very happy to be here. Thanks for including me.
Thank you, Josh. Shabi, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Xabier Mathaba. I go by Shabi. I lead product marketing at Eightfold. So really responsible for kind of our messaging and our enablement to our field, as well as customer advocacy, analyst relations, competitive intelligence. So really fascinated by this market and where we are. And we're really focused on a talent intelligence platform and bringing talent-centered design to everything that HR teams do.
All right, Isabel, thank you. Shabi, next to you.
Perfect. Thank you. So happy to be here. I'm Isabel. I'm the co-founder and COO of Return AI. And I'm going to talk today about different interesting topics of the challenges of HRs, how generative AI is helping. Retrain AI, my company, is a skills-based talent intelligence platform that is powered by ethical, responsible AI. And we're helping HRs make the transformation to becoming a skills-based organization. We're helping them hire faster, retain longer, and develop their workforce better. We offer a comprehensive platform with 3 models for talent management, talent acquisition, and skills architecture, which is a foundational layer. And we're helping HRs understand the first question of what skills do we have currently, what skills we should have, and how to actually bridge those skills gap that we detect. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. So with that introduction, I'm going to get rid of our slideshow because this is very much so a conversation that we're going to have today. And I know a lot of you have already started putting things into the chat. Thank you for that. And as we go through, continue to do so. We like to have a really active chat here at Red Thread. So there's over 100 of you on the line right now. So want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share their expertise and insights in addition to our wonderful panel here. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And the top question that we have to lead us off today in this big theme of what does AI mean for HR as a function is around what should the CHRO's priorities be with regard to AI within HR? And Shabi, I'm going to go to you first.
Sure, absolutely. I think, when we think about CHROs and affronting this new technology and the wave of new offerings that are coming through with AI, it kind of boils down to 3 things. It's first of all, understanding the potential of the technology, also understanding the impact of the technology to your employees and your organization, like what new skills might be required to harness the power of this. Also having really critical thinking to understand how AI will be useful to teams and departments and where it won't be useful. And also, finally, I'd say understand the regulatory environment and what's required of them. And kind of when I think about what CHROs care about, I channel Mendel Crawley, the CHRO of Morgan Stanley, who spoke at our conference recently. He kind of talked about his main challenges were on modernizing his ecosystem and infrastructure and bringing together siloed functions with a unified view of skills and talent. So that's kind of the lens that I think about in terms of what CHROs need to do when they're thinking about this new technology with AI.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of dig in a little bit more specifically within HR, and this can go to anybody, what do you think as a CHRO is just thinking specifically, like, how am I going to get my HR house in order when it comes to AI? Are there specific elements within that they should be prioritizing?
Definitely. I mean, I think, first of all, again, what we hear from customers a lot is the power that technology has to really automate and make things from talent acquisition, for example, much more effective, faster time to interview, faster time to hire, more time freed up for their recruiting team and more efficiencies. That's probably the top line thing that CHROs start to realize once they're able to modernize. And then the other thing I think is the synergy, or the way to think holistically about their employees, not just acquisition, but then management. How do they develop their careers, or how to identify the skills that their employees have? So I think those are some of the things that CHROs are faced with: fast-paced, changing markets, hiring a lot, then slowing hiring. Then how do you manage your stock or your all of your employees in-house currently, and how do you help them develop? And not just the highest execs or the earliest entry employees, but also the great middle of high value employees that might be overlooked unless you have a system that can unearth those the skills and those capabilities and opportunities. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how about other folks? What are you thinking about? What are you hearing?
So I think there's 2 dialogues that we hear people having today, Stacia. I think one dialogue is around the internal use of generative AI and how it's going to augment and optimize, potentially automate tasks and work for the HR function itself. And I think there's a lot of focus on that initially within the HR community around, sort of back on sort of like internally, like they're like you asked the question and keeping their own house in order. And there's a separate conversation. What is HR's role and responsibility when it comes to how this generative AI and these AI technologies are going to be used pervasively across the whole enterprise? I think we're starting to imagine, or at least think about, what it means to have workers in our world that are essentially bots or agents or some digital employee, essentially, right? And I think there's these two big conversations. And I think you asked the question more around the inside HR. And I think it comes to what's going on across every function in organizations for HR as well, which is, what are the tasks? What is the work that we can remove from our team because we can automate, simplify, or augment them to do it, either not have to do it or to do it a lot faster? And what does that free them up to then do that's really important? And how do we prepare ourselves for that transformation? How do we have our people ready for that change? And I think this is where it comes to a lot around making sure that the education and the compliance is well understood by everybody. So that's kind of where I see a lot of the focus right now, is how do I help the team understand the implication and be prepared to adopt that change, be trained to understand what it means and when it's appropriate, and so on. And to Isabel's comment about being ethical. So, I think that's kind of what I see the focus as today.
Okay. Well, let's maybe dig a little bit more on that. And in some ways, this might incorporate a question we just got through the chat. But there are a whole bunch of different HR personas. And when we start talking about things like, okay, we're going to automate some of the work that's less value or lower value, obviously there are different scopes of that at different types of HR personas. So can you talk, and Adam, I'm going to come right back to you for this one, and then we can open it up more broadly. But which HR personas do you think will be most impacted, and how might we think about helping those different folks prepare for this, reality of having to do or having to rethink how they do work?
Wow, it's a very broad question, Stacia. I think there's some obvious things. I think there's various teams within that HR, like the set of roles in HR, that have been leveraging some of this technology for a while in learning, in recruiting. These technologies are fairly pervasive. But I think we always, when we think about the roles in HR, I think we usually go straight to sort of HR business partner, right? That's kind of the heart, if you like, the large body of people. And I think this role is going to have an interesting journey, right? I think there's a lot of augmentation that these AI tools can bring to the HR business partners. But I think initially they're going to be busier, if you like. There's going to be more work as they have to help the whole organization adopt and understand and work out what the transformation and how it affects everybody's role, these technologies, while at the same time, I think it will free them up to be more consultative, which I think is the journey they've been on for a while. I think you look at some of the other COEs, compensation, learning is for sure. The service center are also going to see change. I think the service center is the one where I think we all see a very, very dramatic change in how service centers will operate. This is true for the service organizations, both in HR, but also for customer service, right? Where the augmentation and the support that these tools can bring is very dramatic. So I think that's probably the area that will have the biggest obvious short-term impact. But I think the HR business partners will be, mid to long-term, the biggest beneficiaries of this technology.
To chime in, I think it depends on the use case, right? If it's talent acquisition, definitely I'm going to have, of course, the recruiters involved. And of course, there's a lot of technical people that you need to get involved as well, right? People from IT, people from, actually, we're seeing across our customer committees of AI now being formed of cross sectors and cross domains. So these are the stakeholders. So it becomes like a successful AI implementation. What we're seeing from our customers involve cross-functional alignment and collaboration. So it's really a lot of different people. For example, talent management will also involve employees, right? Because we're going to actually provide to them benefits directly related to their work, to their career pathways, to the opportunities they could go and progress into. So we're going to do a lot of conveying messages around how it's going to benefit you. And the change management has to be very tight and across the organization.
Interesting. Well, Isabel, I'm gonna stay with you. We've got a lot of questions, so And one of the questions that we had talked about before this conversation was talking about what's HR actually need to change in order to take full advantage of AI. What do you think on that?
Right. I think it's already changing. What we're seeing is really HRs are embracing the fact that AI is impacting every facets of their lives, the way they work, the way they interact with people, the way they live. So the question is, how are they going to implement it in their work? And there's an extra mile to go there because I see still HRs trying to understand and still stagnant and still kind of paralyzed. And I think it's the extra mile of understanding much better AI and upskilling and understanding much better how to implement AI. So it's really to get clarity on what is it that they want to solve, right? Understand what is it that is a challenge, and clearly define the AI strategy and aligning AI initiative with overall business goals. And they need to ask some kind of questions such as, what are the unique challenges in our business or the industry? What do customers, employees, recruiters, managers struggle with? And how can AI help? That's the clarity, the first thing. The second thing would be really what we talked about before. So having that alignment with the different relevant stakeholders within the organization. This is something that we're seeing now. They understand that it needs to change. It's not just a very specific party of the organization that is going to be involved, but it's actually cross-functional alignment and collaboration. And this is also going to require providing kind of an ongoing training and upskilling programs to understand much more, to bridge those knowledge gaps and empower teams about AI and to make more informed decisions about AI applications. And the third one, which is really what I'm all about and really very interested in responsible AI and understanding the risks of AI, right? Asking those questions about the pitfalls and how can I mitigate those risks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing that occurs to me, as I've been talking about this with CHROs, because this is kind of in the CHRO vein here, is AI is, I think, is challenging some assumptions, or maybe HR needs to challenge some of its own assumptions about what its role is. And we got a question from Stephen, which we'll get to in a minute, about, what HR's role is in human performance or enabling the organization. But so much of HR's role, I think, historically has been about keeping the organization safe, right? Keeping it safe and being, careful about the risks. But there comes a point at which you wonder, and I say this lovingly as the child of two lawyers, to what extent are we, keeping ourselves safe versus inhibiting our growth or inhibiting the future? And I think that may be requiring some fundamental rethink on the part of some CHROs about what is HR's role overall within the organization. Does that resonate with you all? I mean, this is just kind of something that's been going through my head.
I think it does resonate, Stasia. I think there's a huge question for every CHRO to ask, which is, how are they going to perceive their role in this transformation? This transformation is coming. I think we can all see that it isn't an optional thing anymore. It's going to happen. The question is, are you leaning into it and working out how to make your organization leverage this transformation as effectively as possible? Or are you waiting for someone else to do that and hoping to help them or support them? I think that's ultimately the choice every CHRO has to make. And I did see the question earlier, is this really HR's role, or is this their responsibility? And I think that's the question they have to answer for themselves. And I believe it is. I think it is a great opportunity for HR to step in and say, this is about performance. This is about human work. This is about what work people need to do and how they do it. And that is ultimately what is HR's responsibility, to create a sustainable employee experience that is attractive to people who want to work for you, want to stay with you, and want to succeed with you. And so I think all of this rolls into that mission, right? That goal for HR ultimately.
And I think the HR role is becoming much, bigger now. That's what we're seeing. So HRs are becoming kind of, getting to those decision makers and saying, hey, this is an important matter, and we should not just look at the HR aspect. It's a business aspect. It's a business problem. And so they're also learning, I think, more to talk about KPIs that are business oriented, not just HR oriented. That's what we're seeing across the board. And again, this is the upskilling that HRs are going through, the transformative, they're going through, and 77% of CEOs are thinking about that problem, about not having skilled employees, right? And so this is going to be impacting their business results. So it comes back to HR, and the most important asset and organizations have are their talent. So definitely this is sitting on the table of an HR.
Yeah.
Just
So
to
Josh,
add to-
Josh, oh, sorry. I want to get Josh in here because he's
Go
been
for it.
waiting calmly. But I think this question of kind of expansion of responsibility or impact gets at this question of how do you even justify the additional expense of AI? You know, it's fascinating. I would listen to this great podcast called the AI Breakdown. If any of y'all are podcast junkies, I recommend it. And in it, they like to talk about how so much money has gone into the development of AI, but there's been, relatively little return to those companies that have developed the AI because enterprises haven't been buying it at whatever frequency. And that's because it can be expensive. So my question, Josh, to come to you is how are you seeing HR in particular justify the additional expense of AI for HR?
Yeah, I would say, kind of just, I guess to answer that question, but also to build on what some of the others were saying.
Yeah.
From my perspective, like AI is ultimately just a tool, right? And how both we as vendors implement, that tool into our products, but also how organizations or our customers leverage those tools is ultimately how value is derived. And, I think like a really good analogy is, 25, 30 years ago when Excel came out, it's completely transformed how like the finance departments work and operate at different companies. And, I think, with AI, it's transforming probably every department, but certainly our world, HR. And it's, a tool that can be leveraged. And, as Adam mentioned, organizations or individuals can either lean into that or wait and be disrupted themselves. And, but ultimately, how to justify the expense, really it's, and I would hope that the vendors work with customers or people with this, but ultimately it's going to be building a business case of how can leveraging this tool actually make a business outcome better. And that might be, time oriented, where you can, free up time or have decision making process happen faster. It could be just giving access to more intelligence or more data that's, has intelligence derived off that data, so that ultimately better decisions can be made. Factoring in leveraging a tool to justify solving a business problem, I think is really what needs to be done to justify the expense.
Mm-hmm. So it has to solve. So I think that the point is we say a lot with Red for that. It has to be you can't be running after the shiny object just because it's cool. You need to be solving a real problem. Yeah,
exactly. Right. And I think, certainly I think, how Bongo's been incorporating, AI into our tools works towards solving a problem. And that's really, I hope this is the truth I know it's not, but I'd like to think it as a philosophy of, starting with the problem and then going to find tools that fill that problem, as opposed to like you mentioned, chasing the shiny object or some vendors I feel like have been adding AI into their product just because, right? Because everybody has to, and that's what's talked about at trade shows. But, ultimately, if you can leverage, it for what it is, a tool, and use that tool to extract a better outcome, ultimately it should pay for itself.
Yep, absolutely. We got a question, and I know we're a little bit over on this section, but I'm going to throw this in, and then we're going to go on to our next section, which gets to some of the other questions in chat. But as you all have been talking with folks, with organizations about adopting Gen AI or how they're rethinking how they're going to use it, have you seen any particular cultural attribute or attribute of the leaders themselves regarding kind of their openness to adopting AI. So the example given in the question was around curiosity or sharing expertise or growth mindset, et cetera.
Yeah, I think we've seen some organizations who are, some of them in the professional services space or financial services who are very much, I mean, all industries nowadays have their share of knowledge workers, but these are people who are kind of continually consuming information. And I've seen them be a little bit more at the forefront in terms of wanting to capture the potential of the tools and can think of continually how to apply it to their own internal process, to supporting their customers as well. So those are some elements. It's like just a general curiosity. Another trend that kind of came up, we were speaking to Deloitte recently, they talked about in their Human Capital Trend Report about the concept of digital playgrounds, like giving employees safe spaces to trial new technology. And I think that's really important. Like the earlier you start and the earlier you have an appetite to sort of try in different scenarios and in different departments even, the sooner you'll be able to see outcomes or things that are driving positive, results without having to go big bang and go across your whole enterprise all at once. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing, or some of the things that we're seeing among customers who are a little more faster to adopt or thinking already about how to implement generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also is impacted by two factors. One, really, as Xavi was saying, really the openness, the curiosity, but also the industry you're in. If you need to innovate constantly, like if you're in tech, you're used to do that. You're used to doing constant upskilling anyway. So openness is, of course, a major factor, but also how big is the problem you have, right? How accentuated is your challenge? So healthcare, for example, is really keen to adopt because they have and they're facing a lot of challenges. They're adopting AI across the board, not just for HR, but across the board. One of the organizations we're working with a large healthcare company has a problem of shortage of talent, right? There's the most in-demand position is nurses, and also burnout problems. So both sides. So they have to solve that, right? So that's why the motivation to innovate is really big.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Yeah, Adam.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's kind of two patterns that I see. I think there's always a desire by HR to solve for everybody, but I think where we're actually seeing more traction today is where it gets kind of specific, and you're seeing persona-based, targeted, a solution for a nurse, a solution for a call center rep, a solution for, and so on. So I think that is the reality. What we're seeing today culturally is this pick a pocket, focus on it, create playgrounds for people in another area. But again, this sort of more individual targeted activities today where people are solving for a particular problem. I think that will change over time, but that's kind of where we're at today, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess just to add to the group too, what AI has done is it's like democratized access to a new capability, made it a lot more, the barrier to entry and experience, new capability is a lot lower than it was 2 years ago. And so what that's created is, I think, a couple things. One, it's jumbled up the balance of power at organizations, and I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned it as people can either lean into it, or I think it might have been Adam. Like people can either lean into that change and be the change at the organization, or they can hold their breath and wait and see. And ultimately. It's typically better to be the change than to miss the train.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, I think it's different, from a cultural standpoint, from like a individual standpoint at every business. Some businesses, have folks that want to lean in, and I think some businesses don't, right? But it's, I guess, up to the individual and kind of place, both placing your chips on specific bets, and that can hopefully make you a superhero at your organization or throughout your career, or at worst, it's like, well, we tried to be better and we tried to do something different, and we learned something along the way. That's the alternative.
Yeah. Josh, this was mentioned, and we're having a little bit of in and out with you on your volume. If you can just make sure you're close to your microphone, hopefully that'll.
Oh, sure.
That's cool. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next section because we're like 10 minutes over. But thankfully, we covered some elements of it, which is, I think we've talked about how the HR's role is changing. And Adam, you mentioned that it's really about helping the organization manage sustainable employee experience and that kind of like, but that's what kind of the role of HR is it's changing at a high level with this broad transformation. But I want to kind of dive in a little bit specifically about what's HR's role when it comes to things like helping workers use AI to augment their capabilities. So like some of this actual work design stuff that is can be extremely challenging. So I'm actually, Josh, I'm going to go to you first, but I know Adam, you and Shabi and Isabel all have perspectives here. So, so that's the question. How should HR be thinking about having to help users use AI to augment their capabilities?
I would really say it depends on what the business problem is, right? So if you're, in an industry where having a manager observe, or do one-on-one meetings, there's tools like Bongo that can help scale that, right? Help give coaching and feedback and evaluate whether people can, have that set of skills or not. If it's around like hiring or finding great candidates, there's a lot of tools that are really blossoming in their capability and giving insight. So that's true for I think every business problem, right? Like I mentioned in last, like with democratization of access, that's why there's a bajillion tools out there, because the level of capability just was raised quite a bit. So the expectation of output from the workers is also inevitably getting raised. The same thing that happened with when Excel became a thing and then became pervasive. Like the finance departments, like they didn't, bookkeepers didn't go away. Their output, the expectation of output increased. That's just going to be the reality for, I think, every department, but certainly HR.
How about others? What do you think? What should HR be doing here?
I think the most fundamental truth of the transformation that AI is about to bring is it is a transformation of work, whether it is augmenting the work people do, or it is automating work that people shouldn't do. It's a transformation of work. And that means it's ultimately going to be a transformation of the worker. And I think that means it's absolutely has an absolutely critical role to replan the workforce, redescribe the workforce, re-engage the workforce around what that means. And we see some, there are some really exciting, look out into the long future kind of, will I be a call center person, or will I be a manager of call center bots, right? Like what is my actual role going to turn into? And I think that is a huge reskilling, retraining kind of challenge. That's also a changing expectations and thinking about the workforce differently, planning the workforce differently. And it's not really, I don't think we're going to see that much of, this whole role goes away, but the tasks that role is responsible for will transform. And that is, I believe, fundamentally HR's responsibility to be the advocate for the employee experience, to create a workplace that people want to join, want to stay, want to succeed. And so that's why I always use the term sustainable employee experience, right? Like how do you, over the long term, create that healthy, evolving growth mindset organization? So that's kind of why I see it as absolutely critical. In fact, in many ways, more important perhaps than looking inside HR at how AI is going to affect it, but how do they get involved in what will already be happening across the enterprise today as they lean into this? How do they provide education and confidence and safety and compliance and all of those things while that transformation happens? Absolutely critical roles for HR right now.
I agree, and I think it comes first with understanding what is AI doing to the work, to the tasks, right? There are new professions that are now arising, right? Prompting and training LLMs, those different tasks now that we're seeing. So these are new things that employee could retrain for. And there are augmentations of specific work, right? It's not just new, but augmentation. And there are specific tasks that are going to be eliminated. So understanding those different changes that are happening in the workforce and how we're performing, how we're working, that's the first step. Then understand how it is impacting employees across the board based on their skills, their ambitions, their interests, and then then actually the ability of AI to provide us recommendations based on all that data that we have. That's what we're doing as a talent intelligence platform. Now we can do a strategic, basically workforce planning to buy, to borrow, to bot, to build, of course. So that's really the essence of how to implement kind of a thing like that. And of course, specifically to individualized personalization. You see the name retrain, right? It's all about retraining your algorithms, retraining your thinking, the philosophy of work, and of course, retraining constantly and continuously learn.
Mhm.
The other thing I would just add, building on Adam and Isabel's comments, are I think HR has a very critical role to play in terms of helping employees understand their own skills and the relevance of their skills to open opportunities within the organization, whether it's a formal job, whether it's a gig, whether it's a mentorship opportunity, whether it's training. And so it's kind of meta, but not just how to apply AI, but how to actually have a deeper understanding of yourself as an employee through AI and of your organization. And also that it should be market informed, like what else is out there from a skills perspective, like what areas of the organization are likely to be disrupted by automation or that new skills need to be acquired, right? So I think having that market informed view of skills is a way that HR can be a very strategic advisor to individual employees, to hiring managers, to centers of excellence or teams that are focused on evolving the skills of organizations. Like one thing that a customer was talking about recently at Amdocs, they were talking about how they have the function of talent attraction, which is very distinct from talent acquisition. Like often we think about hire, bring them in and hire. And Victoria from Amdocs was talking more about how you need to sort of ideate about what's the future of the skills you're looking for. And before you even have a role defined, how do you think about the shape of your organization? So I think those are some of the things where applying AI can make HR a much more strategic partner to helping employees, managers, candidates sort of realize their potential.
Mhm. We've got a wonderful chat going on the side. I want to ask you all a question based on that. Which is Ian asked this question, basically asking if generative AI in 2024 is akin to the internet in 1999. I'm going to throw in a third option. I'm going to ask you, we're going to do a quick little lightning round here. So do you think that generative AI in 2024 is more akin to the internet in 1999, or let's say cloud computing in 2010, in terms of its transformative impact on our space?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first because I like literally just typed Ian back. But I like absolutely agree. And to answer your question, I think it's more tightly correlated to the internet because it's not just one thing. It's dozens of things or hundreds of things that we're going to be using AI for, just like we use the internet for. And certainly cloud compute is incredibly valuable and incredibly important for probably all of our businesses, at least if you're a technology company. But in my opinion, for most, at least Western world businesses, you can't even function if you don't have the internet. Whereas, there's, a lot of companies don't need cloud computing per se. And I think that's how AI is going to be, is, in the future, it's not going to just be technology companies, or not just the future, like today. It's not just the technology companies that should be embracing AI. It's every business, and those that don't, I think are going to get lapped.
Okay, strong vote. All right, Adam, how about you?
I kind of like Josh's answer at the PC, right? Like, I mean, to go back even further, I think we're probably have better visibility or understanding of these transformations than we had when the PC revolution happened, but definitely more like the internet or the PC. Organizations that fail to find this success are simply going to get ignored or left behind. And so I think it's much, much bigger than cloud computing or even mobile to a sense, or social media. But I think the PC or internet is probably the best analogs to what we're facing coming up in the next decade.
Okay, I'm only laughing because the chat is now going to the wheel fire.
Yeah.
Those are great.
We got some real believers on the line here, guys. Shami, what about you?
I'm going to take a more pedantic or kind of a funny approach to this, but I was thinking, like, the nature of progress, it creeps up on you and you don't notice it. Like, been a business traveler for many years now, And the first time I saw people with little wheels on their carry-on luggage, I was like, oh, that's cute. Oh, it's mostly flight attendants. Okay, that'll never catch on. Then like 6 months later, you're buying a carry-on luggage with the little wheels on it. Then fast forward, you see some people pushing it with like, they have the casters on it. The thing rolls around and slides around by itself. And you're like, oh, now I have one of those too. And I thought that was silly when it came out. It's like things creep up on you, but the more useful they are, the more they catch on. So in some ways, a lot of these analogies are great. Like I love fire, I love the wheel, I love electricity. I don't know if I can pick just one, but I think of that. It's like, it's not always so revolutionary. Sometimes it's little things that creep up on you, little improvements, and you start to see that, oh, this is kind of the way to go.
Okay, Isabel, let's be quick because
Yeah,
I
I know
ended
we
up
have-
going
we don't
way
have
longer.
a lot of time, but of course, it's much bigger, right? And it's the next revolution, and we haven't even seen. It's just the tip of the iceberg. That is it.
Okay. All right. You've heard it here. We go from fire to electricity to the internet to luggage. Okay, let's talk about responsible AI. So we've got the enthusiasm. Let's maybe temper this with a little bit of reality as well. So, Isabel, what is responsible AI and what do you think is HR's role in promoting it?
Okay, so we're calling down the innovation. So innovation and regulation, can they coexist, right? Of course. And I think there's nothing to be, AI is an abrupt asset and we can stop it. And responsible AI is basically an umbrella of terms, an aspect of making appropriate business and ethical choices when adopting AI. These include transparency, fairness, bias mitigation, explainability, accountability, safety, privacy, and of course, regulatory compliance. And we're seeing a patchwork of regulation that is coming in different jurisdictions, whether it's in the EU or in the States. You have California, you have actually the law 144 in New York, and HRs are pretty confused because it's how do I comply to all of that when I have a global organization or distributed organization? And the early adoption of AI and generative AI has resulted in the emergence of responsible AI, right? It became kind of a key topic when you saw the benefits of AI and also the pitfalls, right? AI can be amazing and can solve a lot of challenges, but also can bring erroneous recommendation, biased recommendation, and we can see this in ChatGPT, right? We can see it for ourselves. So it really is the best marketing campaign we could never afford for AI, but also understanding also they have a lot of problems. So a few of the things that we're seeing across the board is those regulatory requirements, but there are principles that are bigger and much higher level than those specific regulatory requirements, such as you need to put specific check boxes to let candidates that know that they're going to be assessed by an AI and they have an opt-out. These are things that are technical, or doing a bias audit. Of course, this is not technical, but these are requirements, and we can comply to that. But really, the principles of AI and mitigating those risks that AI can create. And as an attorney, unfortunately, and also having done my research at NYU in the risk management department about responsible AI, about how to guardrail technology, research specifically on explainability and bias detection. And also as part of the World Economic Forum on the program of really understanding what is responsible AI and standardize it, because it has many different determinations. So really the 5 principles are going to be about bias detection, right? Having those fairness algorithms and constantly measure for specific output to see if they're not having an impact or adverse impact over specific protected populations, specific protected classes, such as gender, ethnicity, age, and so forth. And again, regulatory requirements are telling us that these are more of the protected classes on this jurisdiction or the other. It could vary. Explainability, and this is something that we've put a lot of emphasis in our product to really show why that person was recommended, right? This is the person that was recommended and why. Traceability, explainability, it has to be communicated, it has to show those criteria, because this is actually a very important decision, and it has to be based, it has to be with those bias reductions. It's never eliminated, but it's definitely tracked and reduced constantly, course corrected. Auditability, accountability. There's more parameters. I can elaborate upon it for hours, but at the end of the day, it's really have this intention of understanding and asking those questions and being able to comply to the specific requirements in the jurisdiction you're in. And understand how it can really kind of amplify biases, right? Because that could be very, very dangerous also when you're making a decision about hiring or promoting someone, but it could be a much better than a human, which is a black box, right? We don't know why a specific recruiter promoted someone or internally or externally recommended a specific candidate. So definitely the advantages of tracking that and having the explainability, transparency is very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You all can see why we ask Isabel that question first. She's obviously very passionate and has done a lot of work in this space. There's a good comment in the chat that I just want to call out, which is that responsible AI and AI legislation is not necessarily focused on generative AI. And I think that is important to remember, and also important to remember that a lot of the efforts around the legislation or other work that's in progress has not just started, right? This is something that's longstanding. And I know that the commissioner of the EEOC, Keith Sonderling, has been out doing a lot of conversations with folks, helping them particularly remember around the bias element that, the lack of discrimination in hiring and promotion processes is right at the heart of what the EEOC has always cared about. And that's why, in particular, they're interested in AI. So just wanted to pull that point out.
I agree.
Yep.
Wholeheartedly, and Sonderling, Chris, and Commissioner Keith Sonderling, which participated in a panel which we had together, was actually saying nothing changed. That's nothing changed. It's still, you cannot discriminate. Nothing changed. There's a machine, it discriminates. There's a human, they discriminate. It's forbidden. So in that point of view, I understand, we should continue and do the same.
No, absolutely. Okay. I want to ask a question though, and I think we're going to go to Adam on this one, which is, okay, we went from hype and excitement to ethics. How do we kind of bring these together? And are there ways that ethical AI might limit the overall effectiveness of AI, or how should we think about that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's wonderful actually that we're already having a great debate about ethics when it comes to AI, like from day one, rather than it arriving 10 years into the social networking experiment, when somebody went, oh, that's interesting. Sort of started there, right? I think the interesting thing about AI today is it's probably both the antagonist, it's the trigger for this concern, but it may also be the solution. I mean, today, I think people are starting to build AIs that can monitor AIs, right? And so you're ending up with this very fascinating cycle going on, where people are, using actual one AI to validate that the other AI isn't using inappropriate content or sharing copyrighted material or using inappropriate language and so on. And so we're sort of seeing this interesting sort of, this battle between the sort of, the AI starting to sort of antagonistically work out that resolution. So it's quite fascinating from a technical perspective about how that's being solved. I think on a pure, experiential level, I think we really struggle to understand what that means. Like, what does the user expect? How will people react to that? I think we have really very poor understanding. And I think a lot of times when we say ethics, that's where we're spending a lot of our energy. Like, I want the AI to respond to me in a way I like or respect or trust. And then you get to the legal risk, legislative compliance, and that's always going to be a long journey, right? Because it takes a long time to get that correct, and everyone fights it, right? So I think it's going to be a really interesting part, and it's part of the conversation that I think the people organization, the HR part of the organization, is naturally aligned to monitor and communicate and highlight and identify risk. And I think it's their job to do that and keep surfacing it up. But it is going to be a very interesting journey as those different aspects of it come through every time, right? But as I said, I don't know if we've seen anything that's truly answering the question today, other than the great news is that we're at least asking the question up front.
Yeah, for sure. I want to take just a moment to respond to a question that Tyler just put into chat. It said, can we say this isn't going to take anyone's job? AI isn't going to eliminate any jobs here. It's just going to help everyone be more productive. Where does this end and the increases in productivity start to change demand for talent? Are we decades from this? I'm not going to force our panel to answer. If they want to, they're more than welcome to. But I will say that a couple things. One is it's going to change demand, right? If we just look at historically, I think that is one of the things we need to be upfront about. I mean, the whole point of technology is that we increase efficiency, and at some point, efficiency will impact existing jobs, right? That doesn't mean you're not creating new jobs and all the like. But I think if anyone tries to tell you that macro, this isn't going to impact the number of people who are employed in the existing set of jobs, I think they are selling you something, and everyone is going to look at them and call BS. That's my very direct answer on that. That said, there's plenty of historical examples that show in general more jobs tend to be generated, and we continue to always find new problems to solve. So so I don't think that we're necessarily saying that overall numbers of jobs will change. Third point, though, and I think this is interesting, which is that if you all have not or do not follow Ethan Mollick, or you've not read his new book, Co-Intelligence, I would strongly recommend it. He's a professor at Wharton who focuses in this space. And one of his suggestions to drive adoption is to do exactly, Tyler, what you just mentioned, which is to say, hey, at least in the next, 3 years, we're not going to eliminate jobs based on this while we're getting it figured out. Whether that's practical, et cetera, I don't know, but that is one of the ideas that's out there. So I just want to put that out there right now as we're talking about the ethics and the thinking through what's HR's role in all this. Okay, we're going to move on. We've only got 10 minutes. We've been taking questions as we go. Ethan Mollick, maybe Hannah. There we go. Thank you, Tyler, for putting that in there. Okay, so we're going to move on, and I want to talk about if you all are advising your customers on the types of questions they should be asking their vendors. What are they? What should what should your customers of any HR technology be asking their vendors when it comes to AI? Josh, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I would say, kind of back to the analogies, I think it is like fire, where, AI, where you can, it can be used to bend metal or cook food, and those are really good things. It can also burn you. And, that I think that going into the conversation with that mindset, I think is like probably the fundamental thing that customers or companies should be doing. But in terms of like specific, if there's one question, it's probably, is the data that I'm inputting into the tool going to train the model? That's an easy question. And if the answer is yes, I probably should be more suspicious, right, and suspect to that.
Yeah. Or in what ways is it being used to train the model, and et cetera, et cetera? Because there's so many levels of fidelity there, but diving into that.
And that's why I think that, fire analogy is a good one, right? It's like, it can be the bedrock of civilization, or it could be used to, turn into napalm or a flamethrower, right? And like, hopefully there's regulation that just like, probably I doubt I could go to the, Ace Hardware and buy a flamethrower. Like, there's regulation that could protect against things like that. But I think just, approaching things pragmatically of like, what is this even solving a business problem? And if so, how? And, is it, even before AI, would you want a vendor thumbing through, your company's information, or can you imagine if Salesforce looked into, and maybe that's a little bit Amazon, they're looking into the vendors that are selling on the Amazon platform and then creating, their own products to sell. But that's probably not good. And just again, approaching it pragmatically is, I think the right thing to do.
How about others? What should our HR leaders be asking their vendors?
So go ahead, Adam. I see you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's two advices I would give when it comes to this sort of technology area. First is, I think the HR team itself needs to partner heavily with the technology team, right? I think there's a technology answer part of every one of these questions that can get very complicated. And there's a humanistic part of every one of these questions that's critical. And I think HR should be getting invited in by IT when they're looking at the technology. And HR need to be inviting IT in when they're looking at the technology, right? So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, to Josh's comments around, make sure you can map how it's all working and what's actually happening, and tying it to real value, because if it's delivering real value, then everything else makes more sense. Handing off your data to be used for training for something that has no value to you is a very odd choice. The last is probably a little bit around, appropriate skepticism. This stuff looks really cool and it demos beautifully to everybody, but getting regular references, making sure that it's actually being used in real life and that real people are touching it. We ran a program for almost a year to get people to go live and start actually using the technology, and because they knew it worked and they could see it working, and that is critical. And yet there are some amazing demos. You can go and watch videos from all of these big guys showing things that talk like somebody who's suing them for their voice being used, answering questions. That's a very scripted experience that we all can do, right? I think it's very important to be semi-skeptical of what this does and get it targeted to a real problem that you want to solve.
So I think, again, I definitely agree with everything. I think the use case, what exactly are we solving, but also measurable KPIs. What's the ROI I'm getting here, right? I want to talk to a CEO level discussion. What is it that we're getting here? Is it saving me money? Is it actually getting me out of jail? Is it really bringing me more revenue? These are the things I want to talk about with those people, to understand exactly the pain points and what we're solving, and continuously measure so they see the success. That's the ROI part. And also here, as Adam was saying, successful stories. Understand this from customers that exist right now and are showing those ROIs. That's what I want to see. Sometimes it takes a longer time, right, to measure, let's say, retention. It takes 2 years, 1 year, but I want to see that. The second thing is also, of course, ask all those questions about the problems. Okay, so let's discuss the problems of responsible AI, right? What could it say? Are any problems that you can detect? How do you detect this? This is a more sophisticated, maybe conversation, but definitely understand it. And then also understand what's the data that you have, right? These are discussions. If you're an AI company, you need to talk about data. What systems do you have? What data do you have? So how we're going to work together. These are questions that are very interesting to understand when you're evaluating your vendors.
I have a couple of things to add, and I think great responses from the group. I just say, be very direct when you're working with vendors. Ask them about their governance, their compliance related to AI, and their external third-party audits that show that they mitigate bias and they ensure best practice. Ask about the scale and the architecture of their AI. Is it bolt-on, or is it something kind of built from the ground up? These things make a difference depending on what kind of problems you're trying to solve. Also, make sure that the data sets that the vendors you're partnering with are dynamic and market informed, not static, or something that's gonna, as soon as you implement, it's gonna be not effective for what you want to do. And I think ultimately, and it kind of ties into some of the points other folks have been mentioning, is like, understand what kind of personas and use cases each vendor is trying to address and why, and make sure that the AI they apply, as Isabel mentioned earlier, is transparent. It captures user intent clearly. It's not a black box that you can ultimately explain, and if you're ever audited, understand, show how your matching is working, or show how the actions taken by your generative AI copilot are efficient and effective. And then, yeah, I think those are just some ideas that I would put out there.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's a great start for folks. We have a couple of questions that I'm just going to real quick lightning round here. One is, because we only have 3 minutes and I'm conscious, so let's be quick. Question is around the frontier models. Do you all see improvements in the frontier models, meaning like ChatGPT or Anthropic's models, or any of the rest of them? Gemini, would be remiss to say. Do you see improvements in them making an impact on your solution?
I think we absolutely, everybody does, right? I think one of the interesting challenges is, I know from the technology teams, every time they flip to a different model, when they rerun their tests, what they find is it's not just automatically better. It's not like, you get a faster chip, it goes faster, right? It will behave differently. And you're back to having to do a lot of work to step up to each of these models. But on the same time, if you were to go from 3 in GPT world, from 3 to 3.5 to 4 to now, 4.5, yes, it's made everything better. In some cases, discontinuously better, like way better. And so I do think that will continue. I think we'll see that until we reach some plateau of the improvements aren't very visible or whatever, you're not seeing that much improvement. But definitely today, we are definitely seeing improvements every time those models step up.
You need to have a blend of all these technologies and constancy, and it's not stable, right? It continuously evolves. You need to continuously adapt, and you need to train it in the context of the specific use case. Otherwise, it's not going to be efficient. But also, just to conclude, I think it's going to, as I said, it's the tip of the iceberg. It's really going to continue and continue. I don't see the plateau yet, but it's a journey, and like 18 months. In 18 months, it's going to be totally different. I'm actually anticipating that webinar, a year, how different it's going to be. So that's kind of the only constant is change.
Yeah, I
Shabia,
think I'll just
Josh?
chime in and say the rising tide lifts all boats. So with all of these continual improvements and different vendors taking different approaches and showcasing the art of the possible, it's only going to make the state of the art improve, and then how organizations can really get value from these solutions.
Yeah, I guess I also agree with everyone. It's for Bongo's tool. It's certainly as those frontier models improve, like so will ours, and so will, I think, like Adam mentioned, probably everyone's. And I guess from my perspective, in terms of I don't think we can't even see the horizon yet of where it's going to stop improving, and that's a pretty amazing thing.
Absolutely. Well, I want to conclude us here. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for those of you who are listening, if you want to follow any of these amazing human beings on LinkedIn, I'm sure that they would appreciate that. Thankful to their organizations, Bongo and Eightfold and Retrain and Visier, for encouraging them, enabling them to come and join us today. And as I got a couple questions, are they going to show what they do? No, this wasn't a commercial for them. But you can see that they're amazing, smart people who know a ton about this. So if you want to check out what they do, please do so. We strongly encourage that. But I just want to say thank you for being so open and sharing your thoughts. And thank you to the chat for being so vibrant and sharing ideas and content there. And we will see you all on our next webinar. We'll be doing a Q3 Red Thread Tech Consortium webinar in September on people analytics technology. So encourage all of you to come to that. Also encourage you to join the membership if you are interested in having more of these types of conversations. So thank you all very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks so much.